Hey everyone, I'm Dan McCarthy,
And I'm Brian Basaga.
and we want to welcome you to the first episode of Striking Thoughts. This is a martial arts podcast where we are going to discuss the practicality of the martial arts in the real world, how that impacts self defense on many different levels. So, for this very first episode, what we're really going to do is we're going to talk about why it is that you should care what our opinion on these things are. Brian and I are going to take a moment where we're each going to interview each other.
Yeah, sounds good, Dan. And I think, uh, bear with us, audience, a little bit. It's going to take us some time to find our voice with this. I think we're both experienced martial artists. We're both really passionate about the topics that we're going to be covering, but we're both not really experienced podcasters. So there'll be some growing pains. It'll be just like going back to our first martial arts class, however many years ago. We don't even know what we don't know about podcasting, but we'll get there, and we'll bring you along with us, and we'll have some fun along the way.
It's really well put, Brian. And the way I look at it right now is I may be a black belt in the martial arts, but I'm sure as heck a white belt once you put a camera in front of me. I love to be able to teach people, but cameras kind of scare me. So this will be a fun growing experience for each of us.
I think so. And I think we'll build it into something that um, you know is valuable on a number of levels. There's a lot of martial arts content in the world, right? I mean, you can go to YouTube or your favorite podcast service and find people willing to discuss why their stuff is the best, or why they're the best instructor in the world, or just whatever topic related to martial arts you want, you can find. I think what we're going to try and bring you is something as unbiased as possible, something as practical as possible, and we'll touch base on I would imagine almost every topic tangential to the martial arts before this thing is all over, right? When you get into self-defense, you get into how you interact with society and legal and moral ramifications, and we're going to cover all that. And audience, some of what we say you're not going to agree with, and that's fine. I think that'll become part of the discussion as we go along. And certainly, in this world, there are very few times when there's one right answer, but you're going to hear our opinions, and we're probably not even going to agree with each other on everything. So you'll hear more than one opinion here, and we'll grow this into a forum where you can share your opinions as well. Uh, just come along the ride with us, and let's see where this thing takes us.
Yeah, with everything that you just said, Brian, and I think what'll be really good for our audience to know right now is that neither one of us is afraid to open discussion. We like to talk about stuff like this, and neither one of us thinks that we know everything. Neither one of us thinks that we have all the answers. Neither one of us thinks that our system is the system everybody has to practice. It just happens to be we do our own thing. We like what we do, and that there's certainly room in the world for more than one martial art, more than one way about doing things. So if you're out there and you're listening and you have a very strong opinion that resonates, feel free to shoot us a message and talk to us about it. We're certainly welcome to it, and we don't want anybody to think that like we're this is our way and it's the only way that works or anything like that, because it's just not the case for either one of us as a teacher or as a practitioner of the martial arts. Yeah. So, getting started, what we have essentially is we got a list of questions, and what we figured we would do is we're going to go down the list back and forth, kind of ping ponging, and we're each going to answer the questions and kind of give everybody just a little bit of a bird's eye view of the background for each of us since we've both been doing this a long time. So I'm going to start off with the first question to Brian so that he can hit it off here for us. And our first question is how did you get started in the martial arts? What was it initially?
Yeah, so let's see. I guess I started the martial arts, I would say later than a lot of people did. I didn't take my first martial arts class until I was a freshman in college. Um, I kind of went through. Um, I guess I don't want to. I don't know if we're supposed to date ourselves or not, but I grew up. I was in high school and junior high in the '90s, and that was a huge. That was like the era of the classic martial arts movie from my perspective. Okay, not the Bruce Lee era. I'm going to leave that out of it. But in my lifetime, that's what it was. It was Steven Seagal and Van Damme and Chuck Norris and all those guys doing those movies. And um, with with my health and stuff at the time, there was just no way that that was going to be a reality for me. And then Steven Seagal kind of came along and was doing this, something that looked different, right? And I go off to college and I find out that hey, there's an Aikido club here at school, and I can join this, and it looks like something I physically do. And took classes, and it was a learning experience for me. And I didn't know what to expect when I went in, but I stuck with it for a little bit, and eventually, it turned into 20 plus years of training in various systems.
Well, hey, Brian, you and I have known each other a very long time at this point in time, just so the audience gets some transparency here. You and I have been training partners for like 17 years at this point in time. We've been friends and training partners and co-instructors for that long, but that's actually the first time I've gotten that much of a background on your training. And I did have one follow-up question, which was just because you made a small point there of your health, and I don't know what you mean by that. Do you care to kind of expand on that?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, luckily it was nothing major or lasting, but I had extreme problems with allergies and asthma growing up, and I was on a lot of medications that really affected my metabolism and all kinds of stuff. So I was not what you would call an in shape kid, and just the physicality of the martial arts for me at that point in my life, really until I got a little bit older and got into college and was kind of growing out of some of those problems. Just wasn't something I could do.
Hmm.
So yeah, luckily I kind of, like I said, grew out of it and was able to move on. I think we could do a whole show on overcoming adversity in martial arts training, because it was
Oh yeah.
not the first round of adversity I had to face in this journey. So,
Yeah.
how about you, Dan? How did you get started?
I'm the classic stereotypical case of the kid who was bullied. I'm exactly what you would think of, and for the audience's knowledge, Brian and I grew up in the exact same era, so everything that he was speaking of applies to me as well in terms of what was the social circumstances, what was the culture, pop culture at that point in time. So very much the same thing. Um, and for me, it was literally, I was picked on all the time at school. Um, and I got beat up a lot. And that's saying a lot because, for the record, I went to a Catholic school.
Mm.
And so if that tells you anything about how rough it was for me, I went to Catholic school and still got bullied all the time, made fun of, beat up, all those things. And um, it was the summer in between uh, sixth and seventh grade. I went away to summer camp. There was a local YMCA camp that my older brother and sister had gone to several times for several years. I was on, I think, my second or my third year of going to camp. I can't remember which it was. Um, but I went to camp, and even at camp, I got bullied. I got the crap beat out of me at summer camp by one of my cabin mates. Um, and it just so happened that we did these little club things all week long. You got to pick 3 clubs that you got to attend, and the clubs were whatever it happened to be that the skills the camp counselors had, and it happened to be one of the counselors at that point in time was a young guy who was a student at UNL, University of Nebraska at Lincoln, named Bill, and Bill was a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. So he taught a Taekwondo club, and I did that along with, I think, archery and like some, bug class or something like that. I don't remember. The other two didn't stick with me enough, obviously, but my dad came and picked me up from camp at the end of the week. And first words out of my mouth when I got picked up, I want to do Taekwondo. I want to do this. And so I didn't lay off of it. The two things that I absolutely hammered my parents about that summer: Mom, Dad, I want to do Taekwondo. Mom, Dad, I don't want to go back to school. Please don't make me go back to school. I was embarrassed. My feelings were hurt. I was, very, very much afraid and just ashamed of myself at that point in time. I didn't want to go back to that school and see those people ever again, which is interesting because I actually talk to many of them nowadays. So I changed schools for junior high, and I started taking Taekwondo before I started school in the fall. And so, the interesting thing that I would share is the martial arts culture and the way it was taught at that point in time, very different from how it's taught now. Because I was never in a kid's class. Even though I was 11 years old and I was a kid, I was always in an adult class. And we talk about martial arts taking somebody who's weak and making them strong. Nope. Martial arts take people who are strong in mind and strong in will, and they make them strong in body. And that's, kind of what happened to me. I didn't have muscles. I didn't have endurance. I sucked at every sport that I tried out for. It didn't matter what it was. I was horrible at it. So I didn't have any athletic ability walking into the martial arts. What I did have was an absolute iron desire and will that I'm going to do this. And it didn't matter to me how long it took or anything like that. I was in it for the long haul because I really wanted to change who I was.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think you got a couple of topics for future shows in there too, in terms of how martial arts instruction's changed over the years. Very interesting. I will say, I'll add to that. I think, and I remember in high school, I only remember one kid who I knew was taking martial arts classes, and he was the bully. So
Oh God,
he wanted everyone to know. But again, we'll talk about that in a future show. Maybe.
he was a Cobra Kai student apparently.
All right. Yeah, could be, right. The one martial arts school in town at the time, I knew exactly where he went to. But
Yeah.
So next question then, Dan. What styles have you studied?
Man, that's a laundry list. I'll try to be really brief here. So, I mean, we could do that all night. But for the audience's knowledge, I hold black belts in Taekwondo, Hapkido, Arnis, and also Kung Fu. And I actually am trained in 3 completely different systems of Taekwondo, for the record. There's across the planet, there's probably 4 or 5 like large universal umbrella styles of Taekwondo. And out of those systems, I've actually trained in 3 of them. So Taekwondo is really kind of my base art. It's how I started before I kind of went on to things that were a little bit more hardcore. But I've played around with capoeira. I've played around with jiu-jitsu. I've played around with karate. I've played with kempo, shinkendo, all kinds of different stuff over the years. And one of the things I like to tell my students is, regardless of the number of black belts I have more white belts than I do black belts.
Very interesting.
So what about you?
For me, yeah, as I mentioned before, my first martial art I studied was Aikido, and I didn't study that for very long. One of the I guess advantages of training martial arts in college clubs that there's a lot of choices. But one of the disadvantages is as the instructor graduates, things come and go, right? So
Hmm.
I did that for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and then that club kind of went away. I took a little time off, and the next art that I studied was Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, which I always feel obligated in today's world. When I say the word jiu-jitsu, I do not mean the Gracie style ground fighting Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is kind of synonymous with jiu-jitsu today. It's a
Right.
good system. I'm not saying it's not, but the jiu-jitsu I studied was the art of the samurai jiu-jitsu, right? The original Japanese Aikido jiu-jitsu system. So I studied that for also about a year and a half in college, and then I left campus to start my career and everything, and ended up moving around. And then finally, a couple years after college, is when I landed in Nebraska, where we met, and had started training in Hapkido system there, which is still my primary system all these years later. And then also black belt in Arnis. I got at that same time. So not quite the smattering that you've had, but a little bit of background. And in fact, the interesting thing about it is all of those systems that I studied have the same family tree. So I've
Right.
really kind of kept, um, I guess maybe you could say I've kept it in the shallow end of the gene pool from that perspective.
Yeah, when you look at Daito Ryu and you look at Aikido and you look at Hapkido, I mean, the difference is, I would say your training has been very narrow and deep, and mine has taken. I'd say my training's deep, but mine's taken a little bit more breadth to get there. You know,
Mhm.
so. But I also, again, there is a difference in when we started. I mean, I would have started training, like a whole 8 years before you did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the interesting, the human body only works in so many ways, right? We could do another show on this. I hope someone's taken down all these notes about great show ideas for the future. But the human body pretty much works the same way that it worked whenever the first human being was, right?
Right.
So when it comes down to it, a lot of martial arts is really a difference in application more so than a difference in the science behind it, right? So, or a difference in philosophy, I guess I should
Right.
say, than a difference in the science behind how the techniques. So, um,
Yeah.
I've kind of studied, I would say, three different philosophies of the same set of techniques. It's been interesting.
Yeah, that's really a good point. My Pilates mentor Kathleen told me the entire time I was studying under hers, good movement is good movement. And it's really that simple. But when you start looking at martial arts, what very often changes for people is, assuming that they're all doing the same technique, like a punch, assume that they all choose to do a punch. How they apply the punch is usually what changes, not the kinetics of it. It's not the anatomy. It's not the physiology. It's not the kinesiology. It's why am I doing this punch? When am I doing this punch? And that tends to be
Mhm.
what changes more than anything. All right, so the next question is a real easy, quick one, which is just some personality flavor here. But what's your favorite color, Brian?
I'd have to go with purple on that one. Yeah, not afraid to admit it either. Yeah.
See, we can be masculine men and still like those colors.
I actually, my first job out of college, I needed a flashlight, so I went to like whatever the equivalent of Walmart was at the time, and they had a purple mini mag flashlight, the two AA size ones. Brought it to work with me, and we're out in the plant looking at something. And I pulled this flashlight out and shine it. The guy I was with, crusty old, union type of guy, why do you have a purple flashlight? I'm like, I like purple. And he's like, well, I guess no one will want to steal it from you. And I'm like, hey, that's another reason to like purple.
Right. Hey, the self-proclaimed toughest man alive, Judo Gene LaBelle, wears a pink gi, man. And I wouldn't walk up to Gene LaBelle and say, "Why are you wearing pink?" I ain't gonna ask him that.
Yeah, it reminds me of another quote I heard on another podcast by a guy who said, nothing screams confident masculinity like a merce. So just do you, you know what I mean? If you like it,
Yeah.
go. That's kind of so how about
Yeah.
you? What's your favorite color?
The fun thing for me is I vacillate. Growing up, my favorite color was blue. I love blue. I like a good, vibrant blue. It's such a beautiful color. Um, and this maybe is just kind of the duality of my personality because it's a very calm, very soothing, but also electric color. But man, I like red as well. And red just pops at things. And for the audience's uh, perspective, I'm actually mildly colorblind. Um, so I don't have the depth of color that a lot of people do. And so I like very, very vibrant colors that are well stated because the more you start to blend one color to another color, the less obvious it is to me what I'm looking at. So when it's blue, I like a good like royal blue. Something like that. And then, when you look at red, I want something like a crimson, something that I can look at and go, that's a red, or a scarlet, something like that has a fair level of punch to it.
So if any viewers want to send you a box of crayons, the box of 8 will do.
Totally. My joke I've told people for the longest time is, if you look at your computer and you go and look under the color settings, it'll tell you the true colors. Like, I think it's like 24 kilobytes or something like that or is what true color is. I see an 8-bit. I absolutely see 8-bit colors. I'm kind of screwed. I mean, even promoting students in the past, yellow belt, gold belt, and I'd look at the two of them. Those are the same color, and I know that I know they're not to everybody, but to me, I'm like, I can't tell the difference.
So next question then, I think. What is your favorite training memory, or what is a favorite training?
Gosh, there's so many. Um, I have so many to pick from. I mean, training really is my life outside of my family. Beyond my wife and my kids and my family, training is the most important thing in my life. It's what made me who I am. So, um, a real serious favorite of mine goes all the way back to high school. And one of my two best friends was actually my protector in junior high. Like I said, I switched schools. I just started training Taekwondo. I still didn't really know how to fight. I still didn't really understand how to use what I was learning. That took a while. And I had this guy who I went to junior high with, whose name is Aaron. His nickname is Griffin, is what we call him. But Aaron and I, we took a liking to each other like literally day one in gym class. We became pals. And he's been my friend, ever since then. So we've got over 30 years of friendship at this point in time. And so I started training in martial arts and learning techniques, but he trained me how to fight because we'd go in the backyard and we'd spar, and there was no padding up. There's no foam gear, no mouthpieces, no groin cups. We go in the backyard and we'd hit each other, and which I already gave the indication I was no athlete. I wasn't fast. I wasn't strong. I wasn't flexible. I didn't have endurance. I had no physical skills walking into the martial arts, and he was strong, and fast and had endurance. Not necessarily the most flexible person, but he was probably above average in terms of flexibility. Not like splits on chairs or anything, but he could kick me in the head, so that's good enough. Um, and so the first several years of us together as friends, I just got my butt kicked on a regular basis by my best friend. You know what I mean? And bruises and scrapes and things like that. I'd come away from a sparring match with him with, welts and maybe a little bit of blood. Nothing major like a bloody nose or things like that, but maybe like a scrape on the arm or things like that. Um, that wasn't uncommon at all, but I never came close to doing any damage to him. He'd overwhelm me easily. He'd overpower me easily. He'd psych me out, scare me, all those kinds of things. And I think it was maybe around like our junior year of high school, somewhere in there, junior, senior, something like that. We were out in the middle of the night. It's like 2:00 in the morning. And it's winter. You know what Nebraska winters are like. It was one of those winters where we had a dry spell. So it wasn't snowy. There was no snow on the ground, but oh my God, was it cold. It was that middle of the night biting wind that just cuts through you like it's nothing. And, I'm with my best friend who, as far as I'm concerned, he's a hard ass. He's tough as snot. He grew up on the street. He can fight. And I want to be him. You know what I mean? I want to be him. I want to be him so bad that I'm doing what I can to emulate him. We're out there at 2:00 in the morning, and we're in a place in Omaha that's called Memorial Park. And so for our viewers that don't know, what that is it's a park that is a Vietnam memorial, World War II, all that kind of stuff. There's up at the very top of it is a memorial to fallen soldiers and all that. And it's my favorite spot in Omaha. I used to live in that neighborhood. And so we walked to the park together. And while we were training, he strips down to just his pants and his shoes. He takes his coat off, he takes his shirt off, and he's ready to go. And me, I'm hoping I can, emulate his level of what is to me superhero badassery. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how I look at this guy who's my best friend. He's like the closest I've ever come to being able to touch a superhero, or Bruce Lee or something like that. I mean, he's just a kid like me, but he grew up on the street, and really actually fought, spent some time homeless and things like that. And here he was friends with this skinny, geeky kid who was, very much a comic book nerd and had no fighting skills to speak of. But he still, took me under his wing and all that. And so here I am, no shirt. And we start sparring like normal. And you get that wind hitting you and you get those hits hitting you, and it hurts. It hurts really bad. But it was the very first time I ever beat him in a sparring match. He tried to go for a sweep on me and managed not to pull it off, and I reversed it on him and took him to the ground and came in with a shot to the face, stopped it before I hit him, and match over.
Nice.
And since that day, I've never lost a sparring match to him. So yeah, that was like the turning point in my career.
Yeah, I was thinking one of the ones that popped into my head too is it's a similar thread to that, where like you realize you've developed a capability that you didn't have before. I think I remember one time we were just doing regular kicking drills in class, roundhouse kicks, and with a partner, right? So they're holding the bag, down against their leg, and you're kicking into the bag, going up and down the floor and all this stuff. And I was paired up with a student of ours at the time who was a young guy, weightlifter type of guy. You probably know who I'm talking about, or you probably could put it together in a few minutes here. But he was at a point in his life where he was bigger than everybody and stronger than everybody, and he was just he was a physical type of guy, and took pride in that, and he should have. He was in great shape and everything. I actually landed one roundhouse kick so hard, through the pad. I knocked both of his legs out from underneath him, and he just fell over. And for me, it wasn't. It was just like I just couldn't believe what I saw had happened. And our instructor was standing right there. He saw the whole thing. He was cheering and hollering and everything. And it wasn't about, for me, it wasn't about knocking the guy down a peg. It wasn't about that at all. It was just, from my background of having been, that kid who really couldn't participate in any kind of sport because I just didn't have the health or the physicality to do so. To this moment in time was just like a major thing for me, so it's pretty fun.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I also remember another one, and I'll just throw this in here really quick because it actually involves our producer, Tam. Um, was that one of my black belt tests? I can't remember which one, but we had been, several people were testing and we were going through these series of techniques, and I don't even remember the details behind why, but somebody called in Tam to be my uke, to take the technique that I was going to do. And I just assumed he knew what was coming because he'd been in the room and was watching stuff happen, but apparently he didn't. And it involved him attacking me from behind, and I had to do this technique where I cleared his grab and turn around and you kind of grab their lower back and thrust underneath the chin, right, to knock someone over backwards. He apparently, again, I thought, Tam, you knew it was coming, but as soon as I turned around and had my hand up underneath your chin, I could see in your face you were not prepared at all for what was coming. And I was going like full bore. It's a black belt test, right? So I'm like doing this stuff, and it was just a really funny moment because you're extremely good uke. So you took the fall very well, but I'm not quite sure I'll ever forget the look of surprise on your face when that happened.
Well, I think it's his uke skills that are the exact reason why he got pulled out for you. And I think that was a 4th degree black belt test. So yeah, I think that's what did it there. So
good times, and he survived.
Yeah.
He survived. He's all well. He's sitting here running our show right.
Yeah. So next question, I think, is my turn. And so have you ever been in a situation, I'm going to clarify this after I ask it. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had to actually use your martial arts in self-defense? And I want to clarify that by saying, not just have you had to do so on like the back end, but have you ever maybe like even just preventatively used any of your skills?
Yeah, I've been fortunate, I guess, and I've never had to physically enact violence on someone to, stop, protect myself or someone I care about. But there've been definitely times when my martial arts training has come in. I guess I'll say what I say to my students all the time: the number one most practical technique that you learn in a martial arts studio is how to fall down without hurting yourself.
Agreed.
And when you live in a northern climate where it gets icy, you will use that technique. But even just outside of that, there was one time we were just kind of walking around our town, going in and out of these little antique stores that are kind of in the historical part of our town here. I was in the store still. My wife and a friend of ours' wife was outside, and a guy kind of came walking up, asking my wife a lot of random questions. What time is it? Where's the closest this? Where's the closest that? From my perspective in the door, I could see that he was staring at her purse the whole time he was talking to her. So instantly I was kind of in that perceive, evaluate, decide cycle, like what's going to happen here, and can I close the distance, and what am I going to do? And I was kind of to his back, and I was inside, so I would have had the element of surprise. Now my wife is also a martial arts student, so she saw all the same things, and I noticed her like shift her stance so that her purse was further away from the guy now, right? So I'm like, okay, she's in it, I'm in it. Like, what are we gonna do here? And if this guy makes a move for something, but again, I was able to as they were talking, I was able to kind of answer one of his questions for her from behind him, and that took the guy kind of by surprise. And then shortly after that, he decided he had all the information he needed and walked away. So ended well for everyone that day.
Isn't it great? We both are lucky enough that we have spouses that have been basically become lifelong training partners for each of us. You and I are really good friends and have been able to establish a great relationship with each other but also your wife, my wife, we have the same situation with them and they with each other and all that as well, which I think is really cool. You know, I've been in the same situation as you with my wife, where there's been a situation where a self-defense scenario unfolded or a potential one. Let me rephrase that. A potential situation unfolded, and I was an observer, and I was outside of the view of anybody who was, potentially a threat to my wife, and I got to evaluate her as the martial arts student, how she could handle herself. And then I interjected so the other person went, uh-oh. Um, and I actually gave a really good interjection. I yelled from down the hall very loudly, "Hey, honey, I'm going to run downstairs and clean my gun."
There you go.
That kind of a thing.
That's right.
So, my own perspective in terms of self-defense runs the gamut from I have used it in self-defense against bullies because I did train all throughout high school, and I did have a couple of little, minor altercations in school. I did actually do some work part-time for a little while after I first got married as a bouncer. And that stuff was very mild, thankfully. I made it a point of making sure that the other bouncer, who was a much, much bigger individual than I was, I made him absolutely terrified of me, is what I did. I made the guy who was big and strong and heavy, I made him absolutely terrified of me just through little comments that I would make and little quirks that I had about myself, so that he went around to everybody who was a regular and basically said, "Don't mess with him. You really don't. I know he doesn't look like much. Do not mess with him." So, you
Right.
know, and a lot of my own take on self-defense is very much that it's a prevention's worth a pound of cure. I try to use the psychology of the martial arts, and you said PETA a minute ago, and let's make sure we actually cover PETA in the future as one. That's a podcast in of itself. But that
Absolutely.
ability to perceive, evaluate, decide, act, and I make it a point to use that on a regular basis because, man, I don't want to hurt anybody. But more than I don't want to hurt anybody, I don't want to get hurt. So if I can avoid a situation through some level of psychological trick or just mental awareness ahead of time and make sure I set things up for success, I've definitely done that several times in my life.
Yeah, it's definitely true. The skills that you learn in the martial arts classroom. If you're doing it right, anyway, the ones that you'll use them all the time, but it won't be the physical one, right?
Yeah,
It'll be
yeah,
the mental
totally, totally.
one. So, and I'm going to pre-qualify this question and say, in 1 minute or less, what do
Ooh.
you see as the role of martial arts in modern American society?
I'm gonna make that a real short soundbite. I think the role of the martial arts is to make better people. You can take that how you want, but I think that if you look at the martial arts in general, make better people.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yeah, this is one of those questions that's kind of impossible to answer in a minute, and I think we'll end up talking about this for the life of the podcast.
Yeah.
But I guess I would say that in you know the the society that we're in right now is very all or nothing. All in, all out, extreme this or extreme that, and I think what martial arts can do in this society is teach people the value of tradition and the value of the longer, slower path.
Mm.
Um, and evolution is necessary, and I'm sure we will touch on the evolution of martial arts in this podcast at some point. But martial arts, I think, can also teach you how and when to evolve and when.
Yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right, and there's a difference
Yeah.
between evolution and revolution too, right? So.
Yeah. Man, that's well put.
All right, we moving on?
Yeah. So that puts us at if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, like classical comic book, superpower. I'm going with Jean Grey's combination of telepathy and what's the other one?
Telekinesis.
Telekinesis. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah,
If we're going broader sci-fi, I want the Force.
of course. That was what I expected as an answer from you.
How about you?
Of
What are you going to pick?
well,
I have a feeling I know.
I mean, let's be honest here. You know, one of the things that I've told many people over the years is martial artists are really Jedi's without the Force and lightsabers. But you know, we very much think like Jedi's do in many ways. So that's pretty good. Yeah, we're both pretty big nerds here. So in addition to the sci-fi side of things, I'm huge into comic books and anybody who actually knows me real well, if you said you know make three wishes, top list is I'd be Spider-Man. If you told me I could have all of Spider-Man's powers, absolutely. But if you said I could only have one of his powers, it would actually probably be the Spider Sense. I'd probably rather have that
Mm,
than anything
mm.
else.
Precognition, yeah, sure.
Yep, yep.
Hard to argue against that, especially if it works on like lottery tickets and stuff like that. We have not seen that power demonstrated in the comics yet.
Nah, not yet.
Yeah. All right. So as a martial artist, and both of us are also martial arts instructors at this point in our lives, so what would you say is a key philosophy you use, instruct?
I try to keep in mind that above all else, it's about the student. It's not about me. It's about if I'm going to teach somebody, I have to understand them and I have to figure out how I can mold my teaching to the student as opposed to the other way around. It shouldn't be my way or the highway. If I can avoid it, it should really be about if my goal is to teach, then I got to understand the student and make the message a message that they can digest. How about you?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. I think the thing I try and always focus on is to get people to think about what they're doing. I think when we talk about martial arts as a practical tool, like you can't, you know, you have to teach techniques, but that's not how the tools actually get applied, right?
Mhm.
You don't do like technique number 137 in this situation, technique number 138 in that situation. You'll ne- there will never be that situation in reality, right? So
Right.
just trying to teach in a way that my students learn, think about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and why it's presented that way, so that they can then extrapolate from that and have something that's really practical and useful. You know, um, and I think to do that, you have to do a bit of what you said too, right? Where everybody kind of has their own, perspective on a situation, right? So you have to learn a bit how your students think and what their backgrounds are, and find a way to relate to that, right? And bring them along
Yeah.
that journey with you.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the ability to teach and to be taught, that relationship requires a couple things because it requires trust. You know, the first thing that there's got to be is there's got to be at least a level of trust where they can look at you and go, well, I think you know what you're doing. Um, I'm going to stick with you long enough to see if you actually know what you're doing. That's got to be there.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and then if you're going to be able to pass along anything meaningful, what you just said about, you know, getting them to think, that's super important. If all they do is just copy you and emulate you, that they won't have anything at the end of the day because they don't understand it from a context of what it means to them. They just monkey see, monkey do.
Exactly. Human beings don't have a good. We're not very instinctual. Like you don't. Very few people can walk into a martial arts class and just get it.
Right.
They come in with some preconceived notion, or maybe no preconceived notions, but they still have a lot of physical ground to cover. So you have to you have to get people comfortable too with like breaking it back down to very, very basic stuff. Like I always tell my first students when they come in, this is it's somewhat akin to, you've been standing and walking your entire life, and I'm going to tell you you're doing it wrong.
Right.
And it's going to take you a long time to figure out what I mean and how to change it, right? But once we get over that hump, right? Like it gets easier, So there's that's where that trust comes in, right? People get beat down at the beginning, like, man, I can't do anything right.
Yeah.
I can't even like he tells me to stand, and then he tells me I'm doing it wrong. It's like, that can drive people away quickly if you don't work on the trust aspect of that. And
Yeah.
another funny thing I'll throw in here, like if you, a lot of people, will tell you like, oh, I don't need martial arts or whatever because I'll figure it out. Like when the time comes, I'll figure it out. I'm crafty, I'm smart, whatever. If you think you can figure it out, I will just point out that in the last whatever it was 6 months here, this world has faced a pandemic respiratory infection, and most of society figured that out by running to the grocery store and buying all the toilet paper. So
Yeah.
talk about things that aren't going to help you. That's where they all went. So
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding, man. I mean, you're gonna do whatever it is you're trained to do, and I've had so many students over the years tell me, like, no, I won't. No, in the real world, I'll be able to handle it. No, you won't. Absolutely, you won't. You're gonna do it. You're gonna do exactly what it is you've programmed your neurons to do. This is how science works. It's not. It's not. My opinion. It's empirical science. You're whatever you train your neurons to do through repetition is going to be what your body chooses to do automatically. It's just how it is.
that's right. And then that's well, we could talk about this for a whole episode too. That's assuming that you choose the fight part of the fight or flight response, right? So
Oh yeah,
there's some people think they know what they're going to do, and then when stuff happens, they don't do that. They do the other
yeah, yeah. The other thing, I love it.
thing.
So next question would be, who's the best teacher you've had, and why do you feel so?
Oh man, that's a tough one, because I did, the vast majority of my training in the Hapkido system under, the same group of instructors, the group of instructors that we train with together and ultimately teach with now. So I would say, like, out of all that, like Master Rose clearly had the most impact on my development as a martial artist because I trained with him the most over the longest period of time. Sorry, Grandmaster Rowe. I gotta get used to saying that now.
I don't think he's going to be offended.
Yeah, I hope not. No offense intended, certainly. But I think if I go back, like I think the guy that got me really hooked on martial arts was uh, Sensei Peter Ward from that Aichi Jiu-Jitsu club at Purdue. He, when I when I took my first martial arts class in that Aikido club, I was not a good student. Like I wasn't. I didn't know. Again, I had never really done anything super physical. Didn't know how to learn physical things. I was very academic. I still am. But at that point in time, I was used to academics coming easily to me, and this stuff wasn't coming easily to me. I was very frustrated, and because of that, I wasn't a good student. And I think somehow just the way that Sensei Peter ran things just connected with me better. And I think it showed me that I could do this stuff and I could learn it. And that really got the passion going for me in a different way, right? So it was less about like, hey, this is something I want to try, and maybe I could be like this guy from the movies who, thank God, it didn't turn out like that guy. But anyway, um, it really changed what the martial arts meant to me, I think.
Mm.
And so I think without him, I wouldn't have met the rest of the Hapkido club guys and had the chance to be impacted in the way that they impacted. And this is going to be interesting. I'm interested to hear your answer to this question too, because I know you've worked with a whole bunch of different people over time, and you've been impacted heavily by a couple of them. So I'm interested to hear which one you answer.
Well, I think actually my answer is very similar to yours in nature. I mean, the way you answered it was very much the same way I would answer it, which is to say, we kind of have a very similar pedigree, at least for about the last close to 20 years. And out of that whole group of people, it's definitely Grandmaster Michael Rowe. He's definitely the person who made Hapkido make sense to me, even though I'd already been training in Hapkido long before I met him. He took it from techniques and turned it into a system for me. I already knew how to do the most of the curriculum from white to brown belt, but I still didn't understand it. I mean, I knew the technique, but I didn't know this. I didn't understand the system. He made it possible for me to understand what it was I was really doing from a strategic standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, from a principle standpoint, so that I actually understood what I was doing, as opposed to having a technique that was a magic trick. Oh, hey, look, I can do an armbar to somebody, but I don't know when to do an armbar or why to do an armbar. But definitely the person who's, he's my martial arts dad, is Sifu Pete Starr. And for those who are not familiar with Philip Starr, he's actually a martial arts author. You can find several of his books by Blue Snake Press. He's, at this point in time, I think he got 10 books that are available to purchase, and every last one of them is a gem and worth reading. He started writing basically when he retired, but I knew him 25 years ago when I was just a kid. And he was my second martial arts instructor after Grandmaster Ki Hyung Kim, who was my Taekwondo instructor. And I picked up Kung Fu. Basically, my friend Aaron, I told you about before, he looked at me and goes, Taekwondo's cool, but Kung Fu is where it's at. And I went, oh, okay, cool.
Let's go do that.
I mean, that's literally what I said. I'm like, okay, I want to do that then. And it just so happened to be that there was a Kung Fu school when we were younger. We walked everywhere. We didn't have all the worries that parents do nowadays. My parents never knew where I was. And so I would walk probably a good 2-mile walk to my Kung Fu school all the time and spend time with Sifu Starr. And he taught me more about Taekwondo than my Taekwondo instructor did. Interestingly, he taught me more about Taekwondo and what worked and why it worked and what didn't and why it didn't, and even Taekwondo's history than my own instructor did. And he gave me an appreciation for the martial arts that made me go, I want to teach this. So he's the person who made me say, I don't just want to do this. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And not only do I want to do it for the rest of my life, I want to take other people along the path with me. So, nobody's impacted me quite as much as he had, because if it weren't for him, I might have, gotten a black belt. I might have gotten 2 black belts and then, gone to college and figured something else out. But it's because of him that I kept driving back to this, even when everybody else was like, yeah, it's a hobby. I'm like, it's not a hobby. This is who I am. So yeah, it'd definitely be Philip Starr.
Yeah, very interesting. I think maybe we could put a link to some of his books, in our description here. We're not affiliated in any way, but I've read a couple of them. I didn't realize it was up to that many. I guess I got some catching up to do, but
He keeps pumping them out, Brian. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's definitely up to about 8. I could be inflating it a little bit, but I'm positive it's up to 8. It might be 9 or 10. If he doesn't have that many actually on the shelves, the others are manuscripts that he's working out with his editor, because I talk to him every once in a while about where his writing's at.
Nice. Yeah. Someday that's a goal for me, is to write a book at some point.
Yeah, me too.
So, well, I think this is the last planned question that we have for this episode. But what is the most practical martial arts technique you've learned?
What gets more practical than a punch? You know, I mean, I go back to Old Faithful. And if you don't train in the martial arts and you're listening to this, a punch is, Bruce Lee once famously said, before I did the martial arts, a kick was just a kick and a punch was just a punch. When I started training in the martial arts, a kick became more than a kick and a punch became more than a punch. And now that I understand the martial arts, a kick is just a kick and a punch is just a punch. And such a great piece of wisdom there of what the journey is of the student into the teacher and all of that. But how do you beat your bread and butter? It's a punch. I can apply a punch anywhere.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm going to cop out on this one and say I really and I truly honestly do believe that the most practical technique you learn in martial arts is how to fall.
Oh yeah,
Um,
sure.
I think you know thankfully we're still at a point in society where most people will go through their entire lives without ever being in some kind of physical altercation, and we want to keep it that way. But people die every year from slipping and falling and hitting their head on the sidewalk, or another common friend of ours, training partner of ours, his father died that way, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Um, so I just feel like that is a technique that you're actually going to use. I mean, it's just like I got a lot of tools in the garage, right? And I got some pretty fancy ones, but like the one you use the most, like the most practical one is like the screwdriver that you use for getting the battery door open and crap. And it
Yeah.
it's not the fanciest. It doesn't have any batteries in it. It's not, cool or high speed or Wi-Fi enabled or anything like that, but you use it all the time. I think that's what the fall in martial arts is to me.
Good. No, that's really a good choice. I mean, you're not wrong if you take out the actual potential for violence for a moment and you just recognize everybody's going to fall, or you're going to fall in your life. Knowing how to fall. Everybody I know who is a black belt, everybody I know that's a black belt can give you oh yeah, this is a time I used a break fall in the real world because this happened, and yep, they work.
Yeah, very good. Very, very good techniques. I also use that as a way to make my students feel less bad about practicing falling in class. You know what I mean? Because they feel like they're like you're just kind of. I mean, it's first off, it's great training because it's
Yeah.
very cardiovascular, but they also don't feel like it's martial arts, right? They feel like you're
Right.
even had one student make a comment akin to like, well, this is just the hazing part of martial arts training, right? You got to do this until you get a gold belt or whatever, and then you learn the real stuff. That's not how I run my program at all, and I'm sure
No.
it's not how you run yours either. But really focusing on like how practical is this, and then there's actually we could talk about this another day too. How you roll that into practical training sets in training with falls with techniques and I was wrong. There actually is one more question, and this is a heavy hitter too. So we'll have to be careful to limit ourselves on time for this answer. What is your favorite martial arts movie?
Oh man, that's tough. There's so many. I got a shelf of movies right here behind me. But I'm crazy. I would tell you it's usually the more fantastical ones. I would honestly, as completely unreal as it is, I'd have to tell you Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I love that movie. I absolutely love that movie, but that's because it's over the top. There's all kinds of just fun stuff in it. Um, is it realistic? Is it practical? No, not in any way, shape, or form. But it makes me laugh, and I love seeing all the martial arts that are involved in it, even though it is very much in a tongue-in-cheek uh, It's a very tongue-in-cheek, non-serious thing. I love it. It's so much fun. I introduced my kids to the first Ninja Turtles movie over the summer, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it.
I don't believe I've ever heard the Ninja Turtles referred to as a martial arts movie before right now.
Well,
I'm
it's
shocked.
a comedy comic book movie that has martial arts. So
Yeah, no, it's good. I definitely loved the Ninja Turtles as a kid. I just never put it in the same genre as martial arts movies. So
oh sure.
probably keep me up all night tonight thinking about that. But so what's my favorite martial arts movie? This is very difficult for me too. I would have to say it's like, gosh, I don't know. I would almost have to say it's like Bloodsport.
Oh
Black
sure.
Blood, Van Damme, and it was sort of the part the kumite at the end there where he's there's all these different guys from different places fighting their different styles against each
Hmm.
other. Um, just something about that I think back to, and it was so um, just so engaging for me. And I can still watch that movie today when it's on. Van Damme was kind of crazy guy, but he made some really good movies. And
Well, we grew up in the era of Van Damme and Seagal being huge, and that's two completely different ways to go about producing a martial arts movie because each of them, you look at Seagal, you look at Van Damme, they're two very, very different actors, two very different types of martial arts movies. But for each of them, their careers are basically cut and paste. A Seagal movie is
Mhm.
a Seagal movie. A Van Damme movie is a Van
Yeah,
Damme
yeah,
movie. There's a formula to follow for each of them. You can be sure of what it is. You know what it is when you buy the ticket. It's just a chance to see the same formula done in a slightly different window dressing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not criticizing either one of those things because I sure as heck like both of their formulas. So I'd
yeah.
be
No,
I'd be lying. I'd be lying. I actually enjoy all of their movies.
yeah.
Um,
That definitely was I would say my second favorite set of movies would have to be one of the Steven Seagal movies in there. I'd have to think about which one because of what you just said.
yeah,
They all tend to kind of blend together because they pretty much have the same plot.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
but
I have to say, if you want a more serious answer out of me, I actually have a huge soft spot for the very original Karate Kid. I adore the original Karate Kid so much. And the older I get, I mean, I grew up Daniel LaRusso. I grew up that kid. And as I get older, I turn into Mr. Miyagi. And
yeah,
I enjoy that. I mean, I grew up looking at Daniel going, that's my story. I'm the kid who gets the crap beat out of him. And I just want to be able to stand with my head tall and be able to protect myself. Um, and now I want to be the one who makes that kid. You know what I mean? I want to be the one who shares that with a kid so that they can do that. And actually, the when I was a kid, the crane kick and all that stuff, loved it to death. That whole part of the film really got to me and got me going. But the fact of the matter is, the scene in the movie now that gets me the most is actually that bit in the when Miyagi has um his wedding anniversary, and he gets drunk, and Daniel takes care of him. The kid doesn't really understand. I was too young when I saw that movie to get the gravity of that scene and understand what kind of drama they were showing. But as an adult and as a father and as a teacher, that scene chokes me up to realize who Miyagi really is and what Daniel means to him and all that kind of stuff. And so that whole sequence there, and then Daniel having that moment where he goes, "Oh, oh," he has that
Mhm.
dawning moment of realizing who he really is to Miyagi and what he means to Miyagi, and he puts his teacher to bed and he walks away and he stops and he turns and he gives a very solemn, very, very slow, solemn bow of respect to his teacher. And then if you notice, if you watch The Karate Kid, it's all Miyagi teaching, Miyagi teaching, Miyagi teaching. Right after that scene is the only time in the movie you see a training montage of Daniel by himself. He's all by himself, and he's working all the lessons that he's been shown. And it's when it finally hits him the gravity of what's been shared with him and how serious he has to take it.
It's funny I've heard multiple people say this. You know, the more experience you have in the martial arts, the less cheesy Karate Kid is as a martial arts movie.
Yeah.
So definitely a classic that I don't look at the same now as I did way back then.
Yeah.
So I think that about wraps it up for this episode, guys. For all of our viewers and listeners out there, thanks for hanging with us. We would appreciate likes, comments, feedback, ideas for topics, things you want us to talk about. Hit us up, post, let us know, and we'll do our best to accommodate that. We will see you next time, guys. So thanks for hanging in there, and tune in again.
Yeah. Thanks very much, you guys.